Professor Nilthus adjusted his viewing screen and smiled at the 20 students sitting in neat rows before him. Biology class at Galactic Academy always brought together the strangest mix of species, and today would be no different. 3 humans sat in the back row looking bored. Amy Rodriguez doodled in her notebook while David Park stared out the window at distant stars. Sophie Wright at least pretended to pay attention. The rest of the class consisted of various alien species. Kix, a gossamer who looked like floating silk, hovered near the ceiling. Tall, built like a walking boulder from the granite homeworld, took up 2 seats. Wix from the ocean planet of Aquarius kept his breathing apparatus perfectly clean. Fen, a delicate lunar with silver skin, sat away from everyone else. Today we study cellular regeneration across species, Nilthus announced. His voice carried the musical quality of his Centaurian heritage. Each pair will examine healing rates in controlled tissue samples. Please partner with someone from a different species. The students shuffled around. David ended up with Kix, who seemed nervous about working with a human. Everyone had heard stories about Earth. The planet was classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, which meant almost everything there tried to kill you. Humans came from a nightmare place of extreme temperatures, deadly bacteria, and constant natural disasters. Don't worry, I won't bite, David said with a grin. Kix's translucent form shimmered with what might have been embarrassment. I apologize. My species finds physical contact uncomfortable. No problem. I'll handle the samples. Nilthus distributed small cutting tools and sterile dishes. The experiment was simple. Each student would take a tiny tissue sample from their own body, place it under observation, and record how quickly the cells began regenerating. For most species, this process took hours or even days. David picked up the blade, a thin piece of metal designed for precise cuts. He pressed it against his fingertip to take a small sample. The blade slipped. It cut deeper than intended, slicing across his index finger. Blood welled up immediately, bright red against his pale skin. Kix made a sound like wind through broken glass and shot straight up to the ceiling. Medical emergency! Medical emergency! Tall stood so fast his chair shattered. Teacher, the human is injured. Fen activated the emergency beacon on the wall. Sirens began wailing throughout the classroom. Within seconds, the door burst open and 3 medical staff rushed in, carrying emergency equipment that looked far too large for a simple cut. David stared at everyone in confusion. What? It's just a scratch. Lie down immediately, one medic commanded, approaching with a scanner. We need to assess blood loss and begin transfusion protocols. Transfusion? For this? David held up his finger. The blood had already started to slow. I just need a bandage. Professor Nilthus pushed through the crowd, his 4 eyes wide with scientific curiosity. He held up a hand to stop the medical team. Wait, everyone stop. He moved closer to David, staring at the injured finger. How much pain are you experiencing? Rated on the universal scale, David shrugged. Maybe a 2? It stings a bit. The classroom fell silent. A 2 on the universal pain scale meant barely noticeable discomfort. The cut on David's finger would rate at least a 15 for most species present. Several students looked like they might faint. Impossible, Wix whispered. That wound should have him unconscious. May I document this? Nilthus asked, already pulling out his recording device. Sure? David grabbed a tissue from the lab table and wrapped it around his finger. The bleeding had almost stopped completely. Can I get back to my experiment now? Your experiment? Nilthus laughed, a sound like chiming bells. My dear student, you have become the experiment. Amy and Sophie walked over from their stations. Is David okay? Amy asked. Your friend has just demonstrated something remarkable, Nilthus said. He turned to address the entire class. Observe. The human sustained an injury that would require immediate surgery for a gossamer, extensive medical intervention for a lunar, and significant healing time for even a granite. Yet he describes minimal pain and has already achieved partial hemostasis. Hemo what? David asked, blood clotting. Your body has already begun sealing the wound. Nilthus zoomed in with his recording device. I can see platelet aggregation occurring in real time. Fascinating. Kix drifted down from the ceiling slowly. But the database said humans were fragile. Your bones break easily. Your skin tears readily. You have no natural armor or redundant organs. Yeah, that's all true, Sophie said. We're pretty squishy. Then how? Tall rumbled. How does he stand there bleeding and act like nothing happened? David unwrapped the tissue to show his finger. The bleeding had stopped entirely. I mean, I've had worse. Last year I broke my arm playing soccer. That actually hurt. You continued playing with a fractured bone? Fen asked in horror. What? No, I went to the hospital after the game ended. After the game ended, Nilthas repeated slowly. He began typing rapidly on his datapad. You sustained a skeletal fracture and continued vigorous physical activity. Well, yeah. We were winning. The professor's eyes gleamed with scientific excitement. Class, I believe we need to expand today's lesson. With permission, I would like to conduct a series of non-invasive tests to understand human physiology better. David, would you consent? David looked at his friends. Amy nodded encouragingly. Sure, I guess. What kind of tests? Nothing harmful. Comparative pain tolerance, healing rate observation, stress response analysis. All standard medical procedures. Nilthas was already messaging the Academy Board for approval. This could revolutionize our understanding of Deathworld evolution. Can we help? Sophie asked. I mean, David's not special. All humans are like this. All humans? Wix's breathing apparatus fogged up with rapid respiration. Every single one of your species can endure injuries like this. This is barely an injury, Amy said. Show them your scar, David. David rolled up his sleeve to reveal a long white line on his forearm. Fell off my bike when I was 10. Needed 20 stitches. 20? Kick sounded faint. 20 separate sutures? Took like an hour. Wasn't that bad? Nilthas stared at the scar with the intensity of someone seeing a religious vision. Your species routinely survives trauma that would be fatal to most galactic citizens. And you consider it childhood accidents. I mean, Earth is kind of dangerous, David admitted. But you adapt. Adapt, the professor repeated. He looked around at his students, most of whom were still staring at David like he was a walking miracle. Class dismissed for today. I need to revise our entire curriculum. Clearly, we have much to learn about our human colleagues. As the students filed out, many gave David a wide berth. Kix paused at the door. David? I apologize for my earlier fear. I think I understand now. Your species isn't dangerous. Your world made you strong enough to survive it. David smiled. Thanks, Kix. See you next class. Alone in the classroom, Professor Nilthas reviewed the footage of David's injury. He watched the blood clot, saw the human's complete lack of distress, and noted how casually the others had reacted. A thought occurred to him, both thrilling and terrifying. If this was how humans responded to accidents, how would they respond to actual threats? He filed a formal request with the Academy Board, marked it urgent, and began drafting his research proposal. The galaxy had classified Earth as a death world for good reason, but perhaps they had misunderstood what that really meant. Humans didn't just survive their planet, they thrived on it, and now they were here among the stars, acting like their impossible resilience was perfectly normal. Nilthas smiled. This would be the most important research of his career. He just hoped the galaxy was ready for what they would discover. 7 days had passed since David's accident, and the Academy Board had approved Professor Nilthas's research proposal with surprising enthusiasm. Word had spread quickly through the station about the human who bled and smiled. Now 36 researchers crowded into the converted laboratory, watching banks of monitors while Amy, David, and Sophie prepared for the first official test. Amy stretched her arms above her head, completely relaxed despite the crowd of aliens staring at her like she was about to perform magic. So what's first? Running? Lifting? I'm good with whatever. Dr. Hex, a Centaurian medical specialist, checked his instruments with trembling hands. His species had a reputation for calm professionalism, but today he looked ready to bolt. We will begin with basic pain tolerance assessment. You will be exposed to gradually increasing pressure on your forearm. Tell us when the discomfort becomes unbearable. Unbearable like I want you to stop, or unbearable like I pass out? Amy asked. The entire research team went silent. Dr. Hex blinked all 4 eyes in sequence. Is there a difference? Yeah, huge difference. I can handle way more if I know it's safe and temporary. Nilthas typed notes furiously. Remarkable. Your species distinguishes between physical limitation and psychological willingness to endure. Doesn't everyone? Sophie asked from her testing chair. No, Kix said quietly. The Gossamer had volunteered as a control subject, floating near the ceiling in his observation sphere. For my people, pain is an absolute. When it reaches threshold, we simply shut down. There is no pushing through. Huh. Amy placed her arm in the pressure device. Okay, I'm ready. Dr. Hex activated the machine. Mechanical clamps closed around Amy's forearm, applying measured force. Numbers on the display climbed steadily. At 50 units, most species would request cessation. At 75, physical collapse typically occurred. Amy yawned. "Are you experiencing any sensation?" Dr. Hex asked, voice tight with worry. "Oh yeah, it's squeezing pretty good. Feels like when you sleep on your arm wrong." The pressure reached 100 units. Toll, observing from his reinforced chair, leaned forward. "That would crack my outer shell. How is her bone not fracturing?" "Human bones are surprisingly flexible," Nilthus explained, reading from his datapad. "They evolved to absorb impact rather than resist it. Compression, tension, torsion, all managed through a matrix of organic and mineral components." The pressure hit 150 units. Amy winced slightly. "Okay, that's starting to hurt." "Like a 6 out of 10? A 6? Dr. Hex looked at his readings in disbelief. "The pressure is sufficient to deform steel. You rate this a 6? I mean, it's uncomfortable. But it's not broken bone pain or kidney stone pain. Those are like 9s. "You have experienced both?" Wix asked from his water tank. "Broken bone, yeah, when I was 12. Kidney stone was my dad, but I was there. That looked really bad." The researchers exchanged glances. These humans discussed serious injuries like weather conditions, casual and unmoved. Dr. Hex increased pressure to 200 units. "Ow. Yeah, that's an 8. Probably should stop before something actually breaks." Amy's voice remained steady despite obvious pain. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but she smiled at the researchers. "Good data?" "Extraordinary data," Nilthus breathed. "Release pressure immediately, Doctor." The clamps opened. Amy pulled her arm out and rubbed it vigorously. The skin showed deep red marks where the metal had pressed, but nothing was broken or bleeding. Within minutes, the redness began fading. Fen watched with wide silver eyes. "The tissue is recovering already. No medical intervention required. Should there be?" Sophie asked. "For any other species?" "Absolutely. Bones would need setting. Tissue damage would require regeneration therapy. Psychological trauma would necessitate counseling." "For a squeeze test?" David laughed from his station. "That's wild." The testing continued throughout the morning. Sophie ran on a treadmill at temperatures that would give most species hypothermia. David sat in a chamber with reduced oxygen, reading a book while aliens watched his blood oxygen levels drop to ranges they considered lethal. Amy submerged her hand in ice water, keeping it there for 10 minutes while researchers verified their instruments weren't malfunctioning. "Humans feel pain," Nilthus announced to his team during a break. "Let me be clear about this. They are not numb or unaware. They simply possess an extraordinary ability to function despite pain. It is a choice they make, not a biological immunity." "But why?" Kix asked. "What evolutionary pressure creates willingness to suffer?" "That is what we are here to discover." The afternoon brought more intensive tests. Sophie volunteered for the gravity chamber where artificial gravity could be adjusted. Most species struggled at anything above their native environment. Sophie walked into the chamber with confidence. "Starting at standard galactic gravity 1G, Dr. Hex announced, increasing by 0.25 increments. Sophie jogged in place easily. "This feels normal. Earth gravity. Increasing to 1.5G. Sophie slowed slightly but kept moving. Her breathing deepened but remained controlled. "Okay, feeling heavier. Like carrying a backpack." 2G, now Sophie strained visibly. Each step required effort. Sweat soaked her shirt, but she kept moving, jaw set with determination. "This is hard. Really hard. 2.5G. Sophie, you can stop any time." "Not yet." Sophie dropped to her hands, doing push-ups in gravity that would crush a gossamer flat. Her arms shook. Her face turned red, but she completed 5 push-ups before finally sitting down. "Okay, that's my limit." "Extraordinary," Nilthus whispered. "At 2.5G, most species are unconscious." She was exercising. Then the accident happened. As Sophie stood to exit the chamber, something in the gravity generator malfunctioned. Alarms shrieked. The display spiked to 3G instantly, far beyond safety protocols. Sophie fell hard, unable to stand under the increased weight. Dr. Hex lunged for the emergency shutdown, but the controls were locked. A safety mechanism had failed catastrophically. "Sophie," Amy shouted through the observation window. Inside the chamber, Sophie lay on the floor, gravity crushing down on her. Her breathing came in shallow gasps. Blood vessels in her eyes had burst from the strain. For the first time since testing began, she looked genuinely hurt. "Override the system," Nilthas commanded. "Get her out now!" Technicians worked frantically at the controls. The malfunction had created a feedback loop. Every attempt to shut down the gravity generator only made it worse. The display climbed to 3.5G, 4G levels that would kill most species in seconds. Sophie rolled onto her stomach. Her arms trembled as she pushed against gravity 4 times her normal weight. Impossibly, she got her knees under her. Then, with a sound of pure effort that echoed through the speakers, she stood up. "What?" Dr. Hex stared. "That is impossible. Nothing survives that. Nothing." Sophie took 1 step toward the door, then another. Each movement looked like it required every bit of strength she possessed. Blood ran from her nose. Her legs shook violently. But she kept walking. "Emergency override authorization Nilthas 77 Alpha." The professor's voice cracked as he screamed the command. The gravity shut off instantly. Sophie collapsed and David rushed into the chamber before anyone could stop him. He caught her before she hit the floor. Medical teams swarmed them. Scanners revealed damage consistent with severe trauma. Burst blood vessels, strained muscles, elevated stress hormones. For any other species, this would mean weeks of recovery in a medical pod. "I'm okay," Sophie croaked. "Just need a minute." "You are not okay," Dr. Hex insisted. "You sustained massive physiological trauma. You need immediate treatment." "I've felt worse," Sophie said, and somehow smiled despite the blood on her face. "Food poisoning last year was way worse than this." The research team stood in stunned silence. She had survived conditions that should have killed her, walked through gravity that should have crushed her bones to powder, and now she was comparing it to digestive illness. Nilthas looked at his fellow researchers. "Do you understand now? This is not about strength. Toll is stronger than any human. This is not about pain immunity. They hurt like everyone else. This is about something we lack, something we never needed to develop." "What?" Wicks asked quietly. "The ability to simply refuse to stop." Sophie was moved to medical, where human-trained doctors monitored her recovery. To everyone's shock, she was walking again within 3 hours. The damage that should have taken weeks to heal was already mending. "My final report will need revision," Nilthas told his team that evening. "We are not simply studying humans. We are studying an entire philosophy of existence. Their planet tried to kill them for millions of years. Everything from bacteria to weather to predators. So they evolved one simple response." He pulled up footage of Sophie standing in 4 times Earth's gravity, forcing her body to move when biology said it should shut down. They learned to endure, not because they cannot feel pain, not because they are invincible, but because giving up meant death, and so they simply chose not to give up. Kix watched the footage in silence. "They are terrifying." "No," Nilthas corrected gently. "They are survivors. There is a difference." But as the research team left for the evening, none of them noticed the message that had arrived on the Academy's long-range communications array, a distress signal from a... Red emergency lights painted the corridors of Galactic Academy in shades of blood and shadow. David pressed his back against the wall as another medical team rushed past, pushing an anti-gravity stretcher carrying a lunar student he recognized from mathematics class. Fenn's silver skin had turned gray, and even from a distance David could see the tremors racking the small alien's body. That made 34 confirmed cases in the past 6 hours. The unknown pathogen had appeared without warning, spreading through the station's non-human population like fire through dry grass. Nobody understood how it had arrived or why it was spreading so fast. David's communicator buzzed. Amy's voice came through, tight with worry. "David, where are you? Professor Nilthas wants all human students to report to Lab 7 immediately." "On my way." David jogged down the corridor, passing more sick aliens being rushed to medical. Gossamer students floated limply in containment spheres. Granite students, normally immovable as mountains, lay curled in transport containers. Aquarians and their breathing apparatus looked like they were drowning in air. Lab 7 had been converted into a makeshift command center. Amy and Sophie were already there, along with 43 other human students and staff from around the station. Professor Nilthas stood at the front, his Centaurian features drawn with exhaustion. "Thank you for coming quickly," Nilthas said. His voice carried none of its usual musical quality. "I will be direct. A pathogen of unknown origin is spreading through the station. Current infection rate among non-human species is 67%. Mortality predictions are catastrophic if we cannot develop a treatment within 48 hours. Sophie raised her hand. What about us? Should we be in quarantine? That is why I called you here. Neilthus pulled up a holographic display showing cellular scans. Every human on this station has been exposed to the pathogen. We detected it in air samples, water supply, food systems. You have all encountered it multiple times over the past 12 hours. The room fell silent. David felt his stomach drop. And none of you are sick. Neilthus zoomed in on a blood sample. This is Amy's blood taken 1 hour ago. See these markers? Your immune system has identified the pathogen, attacked it, and is currently destroying it. We are watching your body win a war that is killing my species. Amy stared at her own blood cells on the display. I feel fine. A little tired maybe, but that's from staying up studying. You're tired as are dying, Neilthus said quietly. Your immune response is extraordinarily violent. The pathogen does not simply coexist with your systems, it is utterly destroyed. Meanwhile, in my body, in Kix's and every other species here, the pathogen is treated as a guest. Our immune systems attempt communication, cooperation. The pathogen exploits this. So Earth's immune systems are like Earth, Sophie said slowly. Aggressive. Hostile to invaders. Precisely. Your planet taught you that anything foreign is potentially lethal. Bacteria, viruses, parasites, all capable of killing. So your evolution created an immune response that attacks first and asks questions never. David thought about every cold he had ever fought off, every flu season, every minor infection that cleared up in days, things he had never thought twice about. You're saying our normal immune system is powerful enough to fight something killing everyone else? Not just powerful, appropriate. Neilthus pulled up another image, this time showing cellular structures from a gossamer. My species evolved on a paradise world. Stable climate, few predators, limited disease. Our immune systems are diplomatic because they never needed to be soldiers. Humans evolved in a war zone. Your immune systems are armies. A medical officer burst into the room, another Centaurian with fear in all 4 eyes. Professor, we have lost 3 patients in the past hour. The pathogen is mutating faster than we can analyze it. At this rate, the entire non-human population will be dead by morning. The humans in the room shifted uncomfortably. David saw the same thought reflected on every face. They were immune while their friends died around them. There is a possible solution, Neilthus said. We can synthesize antibodies from human blood. Create a treatment using your immune response as a template. But the process is intensive. We would need significant donations from multiple humans, and the extraction process is not pleasant. How not pleasant? Amy asked. Dr. Heck stepped forward, looking more exhausted than David had ever seen him. We would need to harvest plasma in large quantities. The equipment will cause cramping, nausea, fatigue. For humans, these are manageable symptoms. For us, they would be incapacitating. We do not know if you can tolerate the extraction process while maintaining consciousness. But it would work? You can save everyone? Sophie's voice cut through the medical jargon. In theory, yes. If we can produce enough antibodies and adapt them for different species' physiologies. But we need human volunteers, and we need them now. David stepped forward. I'll do it. Amy moved beside him. Me too, Sophie joined them. Obviously, within minutes, every human in the room had volunteered. The medical staff looked at them with something between gratitude and bewilderment. You understand the risk? Dr. Hex asked. The discomfort could be severe. You might experience symptoms similar to the illness itself as your bodies work overtime to produce antibodies. Our friends are dying, David said simply. We're not going to stand around feeling fine while that happens. The extraction process began immediately. Humans were connected to machines that filtered their blood, harvesting the plasma rich with antibodies. David lay on a medical bed watching his blood flow through tubes into collection bags. It did hurt. Cramping seized his muscles. Nausea rolled through his stomach in waves. His head pounded with a headache that felt like his skull was too small. In the bed next to him, Amy gritted her teeth as another cramp hit. This is really unpleasant. But manageable? Dr. Hex asked, monitoring their vitals with obvious concern. Yeah, like a bad flu. I can handle a bad flu. Dr. Hex looked at the readings showing stress levels that would have killed his species. You rate this as manageable. Compared to my appendicitis 3 years ago, this is nothing. The extraction continued for hours. Humans cycled through the machines, donating plasma until medical staff forced them to stop and rest. David lost track of time. floating in a haze of discomfort that his body simply processed and continued functioning through. In the medical bay, the first treatments were being administered. Kix received the adapted antibodies and immediately began improving. Tull's system stabilized. Fenn's silver skin regained its shine. "It's working," Nilthus announced, his voice carrying through the lab's speakers. "The human antibodies are effective. We need more, but it is working." David felt something warm spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the extraction process. They were actually saving people, but the pathogen was not finished. As if sensing its own destruction, it mutated again. Patients who had been improving suddenly relapsed. The antibodies that had worked an hour ago were now ineffective. "The pathogen is adapting," Dr. Hex reported grimly. "It is learning from the human immune response." "Then we adapt too," Amy said from her bed. "Take more samples. See how our bodies respond to the mutation. We'll keep up with it. That would require continuous monitoring. Your immune systems would be in constant combat. The strain on your bodies would be immense. So basically a bad week?" Sophie asked. "We can handle a bad week." The battle became a marathon. Human immune systems fought the pathogen, creating new antibodies as it mutated. Medical staff harvested these antibodies, synthesized treatments, and distributed them across the station. It was a race between human adaptation and pathogen evolution. David spent 18 hours connected to monitoring equipment, his body fighting an invisible war while medical staff watched and learned. He slept in brief intervals, woke when alarms indicated the pathogen had changed, and donated more plasma. His muscles ached. His head never stopped hurting. Hunger gnawed at him despite eating constantly, but he could function. They all could. That was the difference. In the medical bay, Wicks opened his eyes and saw David through the observation window. The human looked terrible, pale and drawn with exhaustion, but he was standing, walking, continuing to fight despite obvious suffering. "Why?" Wicks asked his doctor. "Why would they endure this for us?" The doctor, a recovered lunar, watched the humans with new understanding. "Because they can. And I think for humans, being able to help means they must help. Their world taught them that survival requires cooperation. You endure pain so others do not have to." By the 36th hour, the pathogen's mutations began slowing. Human immune systems had created such a diverse arsenal of antibodies that the pathogen could not find a successful adaptation. By hour 40, new infections had stopped completely. By hour 48, the last patient was declared stable. The crisis was over. David disconnected from the extraction machine and immediately fell over. Strong arms caught him. Tull, fully recovered, held the exhausted human upright. "I have you, friend. Did we get everyone?" David asked. "Everyone. Not a single death thanks to you and your kind." David smiled, then promptly passed out. When he woke 12 hours later, the medical bay was full of recovered aliens who had come to see the humans. Amy and Sophie were already awake, looking as exhausted as... Alarms screaming through the station at 3 a.m. meant nothing good. David rolled out of bed, already pulling on clothes while his brain caught up with his body. 3 months had passed since the plague, and life had returned to normal. Classes resumed, research continued, and humans had become minor celebrities among the student population. Everyone wanted to know about Earth, about the planet that forged people who could simply decide not to die. Now those alarms suggested something had gone very wrong. David's communicator erupted with Amy's voice. "Unknown ships just dropped out of hyperspace. Military vessels. They are not responding to hails and they are launching boarding craft. Who are they? Nobody knows. Get to the evacuation zones." David grabbed his emergency pack and ran into the corridor, joining floods of panicking students. Announcements echoed through the station's speakers, calm automated voices delivering terrible news. "Hostile forces inbound. Evacuation protocols active. Proceed to designated safe zones." The station shuddered as something impacted the outer hull. Lights flickered. Somewhere in the distance, metal screamed as it tore. David reached the main evacuation bay to find complete chaos. Thousands of students crowded around transport ships that could carry maybe half that number. Teachers tried maintaining order while security forces sealed blast doors and activated defensive systems. Professor Nilthus stood on an elevated platform, his 4 eyes scanning the crowd. When he saw David, relief flashed across his features. "Thank the stars. Where are Amy and Sophie?" "Right here." Both appeared from the crowd, looking alert despite the early hour. The first transports are leaving now, but we do not have enough ships. Priority goes to youngest students and those who cannot fight. Nilta spoke quickly, urgency making his musical voice sharp. I need you three to help coordinate the evacuation. We should be on those ships, Amy said. You are students, yes, but you are also humans. Nilthus gestured to where station security was setting up defensive positions. Every security officer, every soldier, they are thinking the same thing. Humans survived a plague that killed us. Humans endure pain we cannot imagine. If fighting happens, everyone will feel safer knowing humans are here. David felt something cold settle in his stomach. You want us to fight? I want you alive and safe, but if you stay, yes, we may need to fight. Sophie looked at the packed transport ships, at young gossamer children being loaded aboard, at lunar families holding each other tight. We stay. Get the kids out first. The first transport launched just as explosions tore through the station's eastern sectors. Hostile forces were not just boarding, they were destroying. Whoever they were, they had not come to negotiate. David, Amy, and Sophie joined the security team setting up defenses in the main corridor. The security chief, a massive granite named Toll's older brother, looked at them with obvious doubt. You know how to fight? He asked. No, David admitted. But we learn fast when we have to. The security chief handed them each an energy weapon. Point the end without the handle at the enemy. Press the trigger. Do not shoot your friends. That is all I have time to teach you. More explosions rocked the station. Through the observation windows, David could see ships surrounding them. Sleek predator vessels painted in dark colors, bristling with weapons. A dozen ships, any one of which could destroy the lightly armed academy. Then they broadcast on all frequencies. The voice that came through was deep and resonant, filled with contempt. Attention Academy Station. You harbored Deathworlders. The Dominion has studied your research. We have watched humans endure what should kill them. We have read your reports calling them survivors and heroes. You are fools. Deathworlders are dangerous. They are violent. They are a threat to civilized space. We have come to eliminate this threat before it spreads. Amy's hands tightened on her weapon. They're here to kill us because we're hard to kill? That's the dumbest logic I've ever heard. The Dominion are predator species, the security chief explained, checking his own weapon. From Paradise Worlds. They believe themselves superior. When they learned about humans, about Earth, they saw competition. Predators do not share territory. We're not predators, Sophie said. Tell them that when they come through these doors. They did not have to wait long. The boarding parties breached through multiple airlocks simultaneously. Dominion soldiers poured into the station, tall reptilian creatures with natural armor and razor claws. They moved with the confidence of apex predators who had never known defeat. The security team opened fire. Energy bolts filled the corridor with light and heat. Several Dominion soldiers fell, but more kept coming. They were fast, coordinated, and utterly ruthless. David fired his weapon, missed, fired again. His third shot hit a soldier in the chest, sending it sprawling. But two more took its place. The security line was being pushed back. Fall back to secondary positions, the security chief ordered. They retreated in stages, fighting from doorway to doorway. The Dominion pressed forward relentlessly. They took casualties but did not slow. These were not soldiers used to resistance. They were hunters who expected prey to run. Then they met humans who did not run. David was knocked down when an explosion collapsed part of the corridor. He hit the floor hard enough to see stars. His weapon skittered away. A Dominion soldier loomed over him, claws raised for a killing blow. David grabbed a piece of broken metal from the debris and jammed it into the soldier's leg joint. The creature howled and stumbled. David scrambled up, grabbed his weapon, and shot the soldier at point-blank range. His hands were shaking. His ears rang from the explosion. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. But he was still moving, still fighting, because stopping meant dying, and David had spent his whole life on a planet that taught him not to die. The Dominion soldiers began to notice. Humans took hits that should have stopped them and kept fighting. Amy got slashed across the arm by claws, barely slowed down. Sophie got thrown into a wall hard enough to crack the metal, shook her head and returned fire. David fought with a broken rib that made every breath agony, and simply breathed through the agony. What is wrong with them? A Dominion soldier shouted to his commander. I shot that one twice. They are Deathworlders, the commander replied. Kill them faster, but faster was not enough. The security team reached the station's botanical gardens, a vast dome filled with earth plants that human students had requested from home. The Dominion forces charged in, expecting to finish the battle. They did not expect the humans to fight dirty. Earth plants were evolved for survival on a nightmare world. They had thorns, poisons, allergenic spores. David used a thorn vine as a whip. Amy broke open seed pods that released irritating dust. Sophie rigged the irrigation system to spray at high pressure, using water as a weapon. The Dominion soldiers, from sterile paradise worlds, had never encountered hostile plants. They coughed, choked, stumbled through undergrowth that cut and stung. The humans who had grown up around such things moved through it like they were born there, because they were. The battle turned into a nightmare for the invaders. Every corridor became a trap. Every room held surprises. Humans used environmental controls to create temperature extremes they could tolerate, but the Dominion could not. They sabotaged life support in sections they evacuated, forcing enemies to wear equipment that slowed them down. They fought with improvised weapons, tactics that made no tactical sense but worked anyway. And they absolutely refused to stop. The Dominion commander, watching from his ship, reviewed combat footage with growing horror. One of his soldiers had shot a human 3 times with stun weapons. The human, a female called Amy, had gotten back up every single time. Another human, David, had fought for 20 minutes with visible injuries that should have rendered him unconscious. Commander Wrath, his tactical officer, said quietly, "We have lost 60% of our boarding parties. The remaining forces are requesting extraction." 60%? Wrath stared at the numbers. "We sent 300 soldiers against a science station with minimal defenses. The humans, sir. They do not fight like anything we have encountered. They take damage that kills our soldiers and continue fighting. They use their environment as a weapon. They coordinate with the aliens who have learned to fight alongside them. It is unlike any combat doctrine in our databases." Wrath watched footage of Sophie crawling through a ventilation shaft too small for his soldiers, emerging behind enemy lines and attacking from an impossible angle. He watched David jury-rig an energy weapon to overload, using it as a bomb. He watched Amy organize alien students into effective support units, combining human endurance with alien special abilities. These were not soldiers. They were students, and they were winning. "Sir, another transport has launched," an officer reported. "They are evacuating more civilians while our forces are tied down." Wrath understood then. This was not a battle the humans expected to win through force. They were buying time. Every minute they held the Dominion forces was another minute for evacuation ships to escape. They were trading their lives for others. In the station's control center, Amy faced down the last Dominion squad to reach the strategic position. She was bleeding from multiple wounds, exhausted beyond measure, and completely out of ammunition. The Dominion squad lead. The Galactic Council chamber was a massive sphere floating in space, designed to hold representatives from 300 member species in perfect equality. No seat was higher than another. No position held advantage. Today, that carefully maintained equality felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. Ambassador Lisa Park stood at the speaking platform, very aware that every eye in the chamber was watching her with a mixture of hope and fear. She was human, which meant she represented both the species that had saved the Academy Station and the species some council members now wanted to quarantine. On Earth forever, the council recognizes Ambassador Park of Earth, the moderator announced, its translated voice neutral and mechanical. Lisa took a breath and began. 3 months ago, my nephew and his classmates accidentally cut his finger in biology class. That accident led to experiments proving humans have extraordinary resilience. Then a plague came, and humans donated their own blood to save alien lives. Then an invasion came, and humans fought alongside their friends to protect those who could not fight. At every stage, humanity showed its true nature. We protect, we endure. We refuse to abandon those who need us. Counselor Dren, a towering insectoid from one of the oldest civilizations, spoke first. With respect, Ambassador, your species terrifies us. Your students fought off trained soldiers. They survived injuries that would kill most species here. How can we integrate a species this dangerous into peaceful society? Dangerous to who? Lisa asked calmly. The plague that killed your people? The soldiers who invaded a school? Humans are only dangerous to threats. But who decides what constitutes a threat? Another counselor challenged. Your species has a history of violence, thousands of years of warfare among yourselves. Now you bring that capacity for violence to the stars. Yes, we fought wars, Lisa admitted, on a planet where everything tried to kill us. Disease, predators, climate disasters. We fought to survive. But here's what you are missing. All that fighting taught us the cost of violence. We know what war does. We know what it takes from people. That is why we choose peace whenever possible. She pulled up holographic footage from the Academy defense. Watch this. My nephew David is injured but still fighting. He could kill the soldier in front of him easily. But look closer. He disarms the soldier and lets security take the prisoner. Sophie could have caused lethal damage with environmental controls. Instead, she used minimum force to drive invaders back. Amy organized evacuations before fortifying defenses. At every decision point, humans chose the option that preserved life. Professor Niltha stepped up beside Lisa. The Centaurian had been invited as an expert witness, if I may address the council. I have spent months studying humans. Yes, they endure pain we cannot. Yes, they survive injuries that kill us. But the most important thing I learned is why. Their planet did not make them cruel. It made them compassionate. Because when you know suffering intimately, you do everything possible to prevent others from suffering. Beautiful words, Counselor Dren said, but the facts remain. Humans are too resilient. If they choose violence, few species could stop them. They could dominate entire sectors through pure endurance. Then I propose a test, Lisa said, not of our strength. You have seen that. A test of our intentions. Give humanity 5 years of probationary membership. Judge us by our actions. If we prove dangerous, restrict us. But if we prove helpful, accept us fully. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some species supported the proposal, especially those whose students had been saved at the academy. Others remained skeptical, concerned about long-term implications of integrating a Deathworld species into their peaceful civilization. During a recess, Lisa met with David, Amy, and Sophie in a private chamber. The 3 students looked uncomfortable in formal clothes, clearly wishing they were back at the academy. How bad is it? David asked honestly. About half the council sees you as heroes. The other half sees you as future tyrants. Lisa sat down heavily. They are afraid not of what you did, but what you could do. We would never hurt innocent people, Sophie said. I know. But fear is not always logical. Lisa pulled up voting projections. The real issue is economics and military power. If humans can work in extreme environments, we dominate certain industries. If we can fight like you did, military dynamics shift, power structures change. Some species have maintained their positions for thousands of years. You threaten that simply by existing. Amy leaned forward. So this is not about morality. It is about competition. Welcome to politics. Lisa smiled tiredly. The good news is we have leverage. Multiple colonies have requested human emergency responders. Scientists want to study Earth biology. Military advisors want to learn your tactics. You have made yourselves valuable. By being ourselves, David said, exactly, which is why I think we can win this vote. But it will be close. The session resumed with testimony from students and staff who had been at the academy. Chick spoke about how humans taught courage. Toll described fighting alongside David, learning that strength was not just physical. Wicks explained how Amy's leadership saved his life. Then Commander Wrath of the Dominion requested to speak. The chamber fell silent. The Dominion had invaded the academy. Anything Wrath said would carry enormous weight. The reptilian commander stood at the platform, his armor marked with signs of recent combat. I came to the academy to eliminate a threat. I brought 300 soldiers to destroy a science station because I believed humans were dangerous predators who would eventually turn on civilized space. I was wrong. He pulled up combat footage. Here is what I learned. Humans are dangerous, yes, but only to enemies. They had every opportunity to kill my soldiers. They chose not to. They fought to defend, not to destroy. When my soldiers were wounded, human students rendered medical aid to the enemy. To the enemy. My own culture would never do this. We kill or we are killed. Humans offer a third option. You stop fighting when the threat ends. Wrath turned to face the council directly. I attacked them. They defeated me, and then they chose mercy. That is not the behavior of mindless Deathworld predators. That is the behavior of people who understand exactly how dangerous they are, and choose to be something better. If you reject them, you are fools. Because when the next real threat comes, and it will come, you will desperately wish you had humans fighting beside you. The commander's testimony shifted the momentum dramatically. Species that had been skeptical began reconsidering. Even Counselor Dren looked thoughtful. The final vote was called. Integration, restriction, or isolation. Each counselor cast their vote while the chamber watched in tense silence. The results appeared on the central display. Integration won by the narrowest margin possible, just 51%. Humanity would be granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council, subject to review in 5 years. Lisa felt relief flood through her. It was not a resounding victory, but it was enough. That evening, back at the academy, the students celebrated with a mixture of exhaustion and joy. They had done it. Humanity had its place among the stars. But the celebration was interrupted by an emergency transmission. A colony on the frontier sending a distress signal. Under attack by unknown forces, all nearby military vessels out of range. The academy station was the closest responder. David looked at Amy and Sophie. They need help. We just survived an invasion, Sophie pointed out. We are still healing, which is why they need us, Amy said. Because we know how to fight while healing. Within hours, a small transport ship departed the academy, carrying a mixed crew. Humans and aliens working together. Amy, David, Sophie, along with Kix, Tall, Wix, Fen, and several others. They had been students. Now they were something more. The ship jumped to hyperspace, racing toward the distressed colony. On board, Professor Nilthas continued his research, documenting everything. He had started with a simple question about human resilience. Now he was watching humans teach the galaxy what survival really meant. But in the ship's sensor logs, something appeared that made the professor's blood run cold. Energy signatures matching those in ancient databases. Patterns not seen in 10,000 years. The Scourge. The ancient enemy that had destroyed the previous Deathworld civilization. Somehow it had awakened. And it was hunting again. Nilthas ran to the bridge where Amy stood reviewing the colony's distress message. You need to see this. He showed her the sensor data, explained what the signatures meant. Told her about the ancient war, about Deathworlds that had fought something so terrible it erased them from history. Amy studied the data calmly. So we are flying towards something designed specifically to kill Deathworlders? Yes, and I think we should turn back. Immediately. There are 200 colonists at that station who do not have time for us to turn back. Amy met his eyes. You studied us for months, Professor. You know what we are going to do. You are going to fight. We are going to try to save them. If fighting happens, we will fight. But saving people comes first, Nilthas wanted to argue. Every logical part of his brain screamed that flying toward the Scourge was suicide. But he had watched humans choose to fight a plague while suffering. Watched them defend the academy while outnumbered. They had faced impossible odds before and they had won. Then I will document everything, he said. The transport ship docked with the dying colony through an emergency airlock that was still intact. David was first through the door, weapon ready, scanning for threats. The corridor beyond was dark except for emergency lighting that flickered weakly. Claw marks scored the walls, deep gouges that looked like something had tried to tear through solid metal. Stay together, Amy ordered quietly. Kix, scout ahead but do not engage alone. Tull, take rear position. Everyone else, standard formation. They moved through the silent colony like ghosts, trying not to think about what the silence meant. Colonies were noisy places full of machinery and people. This silence was the sound of death. The first bodies they found were in the main corridor. Not human colonists, but something else. Scourge entities torn apart by weapons fire. The colonists had fought back. They are still alive, Sophie said, checking her scanner. 200 life signs in the lower levels. Looks like they fortified a cargo bay. And the Scourge? David asked. Sophie's scanner flickered, showing readings that made no sense. Everywhere. The signal keeps moving, shifting. It is like they are not fully in our dimension. They adapt, Professor Nilthas reminded them, his voice tight with fear. Physical form, energy state, tactical approach. Fighting them is fighting an enemy that learns from every encounter. They reached a junction where 3 corridors met. Amy held up a hand, signaling everyone to stop. Something was wrong. The air felt different here, charged with energy that made David's skin crawl. Then the Scourge attacked. It came from the ceiling, a biomechanical nightmare that seemed to flow like liquid and strike like steel. claws and blades and things that had no name slashed at Tall, who was closest. The granite's natural armor held barely, and he swung back with devastating force. The Scourge entity absorbed the blow, adapted its structure to be more flexible, and attacked again from a different angle. It learned, Tall shouted, backing up. One hit and it learned how I fight. More entities emerged from the walls, the floor, spaces too small to hold anything. They surrounded the team with terrifying speed, cutting off escape routes. David fired his weapon. The energy bolt hit a Scourge entity dead center and it collapsed. For about 3 seconds. Then it stood back up, its structure modified to disperse energy attacks. Spread out, Amy commanded. Do not let them analyze all of us at once. The team scattered, fighting in small groups. Kix phased through a wall, appearing behind Scourge entities to create confusion. Wix used emergency water systems to create barriers and distractions. Fen moved with silver speed too fast for the Scourge to track, but the entities kept adapting. Every tactic worked once, maybe twice. Then the Scourge learned and countered it. David found himself fighting back-to-back with Sophie against 3 entities that had learned to predict their movements. They were being herded, pushed toward a dead end, and there was nothing they could do about it. One entity struck Sophie hard, sending her crashing into a wall. She tried to get up, stumbled, and the entity moved in for the kill. David threw himself between them, taking claws across his chest that tore through armor and skin. Pain exploded through him, the kind of pain that should drop a person instantly. He stayed standing. Sophie, move. She rolled away, and David fired point blank into the entity's core. It died, but 2 more took its position immediately. David, you are bleeding, Sophie said, horror in her voice. I know. Keep fighting. They retreated through corridors that seemed designed to trap them, every corner hiding more Scourge entities. David felt blood soaking his shirt, felt his strength draining, but his legs kept moving because stopping meant Sophie died, and he had promised himself years ago on Earth that he would never let a friend down. The team reunited at a central junction, all showing injuries. Even Tall's armor was cracked. Kix's floating ability was failing, forcing the gossamer to hover close to the ground. Wix's breathing apparatus was damaged. We cannot win this fight, Fen gasped. They are too many and they adapt too fast. Then we changed the objective, Amy said. She pulled up a map of the colony. Forget fighting them. We get to the survivors, get them to the ship and run. They will follow, Professor Nilthus warned. The Scourge do not stop once they detect Deathworlders. They hunt until the target is eliminated. Let them follow us, David said. Better than letting them kill colonists. They ran, fighting only when necessary, saving energy for the sprint to the cargo bay. The Scourge pursued like a tide of blades and fury, learning from every encounter, getting faster and more efficient. The cargo bay doors were sealed and fortified. Amy pounded on them. This is rescue team, open up. A voice came through the intercom, frightened and desperate. How do we know you are not those things? Because we are about to die buying you time to evacuate, so open the door. The doors cracked open just enough for the team to slip through, then slammed shut behind them. 200 colonists, various species, all looking terrified and exhausted. They had been holding this position for 2 days, watching their friends die. Transport ship is docked at Port 7, Amy announced. We need to move fast. Stay together, protect the wounded, and run like your life depends on it, because it does. A colonist, an older Centaurian, stared at David's bleeding chest. You need medical attention. After we evacuate. Let's move. They ran through the colony in one massive group, the rescue team forming a perimeter around the colonists. The Scourge attacked from every angle, trying to break through to the vulnerable civilians. Toll held a narrow corridor, his massive body blocking dozens of entities while colonists ran past. Sophie and Fen worked together, speed and determination creating a defensive line that held despite impossible odds. Kix phased through walls to collapse ceiling sections, slowing the Scourge advance. David and Amy fought at the rear, protecting stragglers who could not keep up. David's vision was blurring from blood loss, but his weapon stayed steady. Training from Earth, from a lifetime of sports injuries and childhood accidents, taught him how to function through pain. Almost there, Amy said, checking her scanner. Port 7 is just ahead. They burst through the final door to find their transport ship waiting, ramp down, engines hot. Colonists poured aboard while the rescue team held the doorway. Everyone on, Sophie shouted. Move, move. The last colonist climbed aboard. Then Fen, then Wix. Toll thundered up the ramp, his armor completely shattered but still moving. David, Amy now. Kicks called from inside the ship. They ran together, the Scourge right behind them. Made it to the ramp. Amy jumped aboard and turned to help David up. A Scourge entity burst through the floor between them, cutting them off. Its blade limb caught David across the leg, severing muscle and tendon. He collapsed, unable to stand. David. Amy reached for him, but Tall grabbed her, holding her back. Go! David shouted. Get them out of here! We are not leaving you. You have 200 people who need to leave now. David fired his weapon, forcing the Scourge back one step. I will catch up, just go. Amy's face showed agony, but she knew he was right. The ship could not wait any longer. I am coming back for you. I know. Go, the ramp closed. The ship detached. Through the viewport, David watched it accelerate away, carrying everyone to safety. He was alone in a dying colony, surrounded by entities designed specifically to kill people like him. He laughed. Probably the blood loss making him lightheaded, but the situation was absurd. He had survived Earth, survived plague, survived invasion. And now he was going to die because he was too stubborn to give up on saving people. The Scourge circled him, moving with predatory patience. They had him trapped, wounded, alone. This was what they were built for. David checked his weapon charge. Nearly empty. He looked around the docking area for anything useful. Emergency supplies, maintenance tools, a box labeled Extreme Hazard Station Self-Destruct Components. He smiled. On the transport ship, Amy watched the colony through sensors. Turn around. We have to go back. Amy, we cannot, Professor Nilthus said gently. The Scourge will destroy us. David knew that. He chose to save us, then I choose to save him. Alarms blared. The colony's self-destruct sequence had been activated. Manual override, triggered from the docking bay. Countdown showing 5 minutes. What is he doing? Sophie whispered. Amy understood. Making sure the Scourge do not follow us, and betting he can survive an explosion designed to destroy a colony. That is suicide, Tall said. No, that is human. Amy turned to the pilot. Get us as far away as possible, then be ready to scan for life signs. At the colony, David worked quickly despite his injured leg. He had rigged the self-destruct to give himself just enough time to reach an emergency escape pod. Maybe, if he could move fast enough, if the Scourge did not stop him, if his leg held out, a lot of ifs. But humans were good at surviving long odds. The Scourge realized what he was doing and attacked with renewed fury. David fought them off with his last weapon charges, with maintenance tools, with his bare hands when nothing else was available. They cut him. He bled. He kept moving. He reached the escape pod with 30 seconds remaining. Fell inside, slapped the launch control. Nothing happened. The pod had been damaged in the fighting. Manual release only, which meant crawling back outside while the Scourge waited and the station was about to explode. David laughed again. Because what else, Co?